They heard about him, they know what he teaches, and they rejected it. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to take a deeper dive on the state of the Catholic Church here in the United States and even more broadly in Western civilization. But before I start, I just wanted to point out that a lot of my sourcing is from this essay here. It's a really great essay, From Christendom to the Apostolic Mission. And it's really, really helpful for framing our mindset and understanding where the church was, where we are today, and hopefully where we can lead each other back to Christ and into a brighter future tomorrow. So, what is the state of the church today? I've been working in parish ministry in Catholic parishes since about 2010. And in that time, I've seen a lot of different churches, a lot of different ways to skin a cat, if you will. There's people who think that you want to push forward on formation. There's people who think you should really bring people in with evangelization events, or soft entry points is a buzzword that's used a lot. Then there's still others who focus solely on the parish's outreach and service to the poor and the needy. And those are all fine strategies. But across all the strategies, one thing that I really have seen as a common thread, and in my opinion, a mistake, and this essay would echo that, is we are teaching and talking to the people in our communities from the lens of a Christendom civilization. What do I mean by that? What is a Christendom civilization? It's one in which the people in it, the culture itself, supports Christianity and its teachings, its morals, its right and wrong actions, and that just isn't true. You know, I was lucky enough that God saw fit to instill in me a strong faith at a very early age, and so I continued to go to Mass and practice my faith, even sometimes when it was all on my own. And maybe some of you can relate to that. Maybe you have families that sort of practice your faith tradition, sort of don't, and you find yourself sort of listless in the middle. And God kind of enters into that for you and helps guide you along. I encourage you to pray into that, to ask God to continue to help you. But as I was growing up, my family, my friends, none of which were really ostensibly Catholic or practicing it. I mean, I certainly, if my mom or my cousins or my uncles, if they were asked by the government to put, what is your religion, they would check the box of Roman Catholic. But other than getting baptized and going to Mass once a year, maybe on Christmas or Easter, the practice of the faith, and certainly the knowledge of it, was lacking. And so by virtue of living in that, crucible, I was able to make a lot of friends that had nothing to do with the church. They didn't practice the faith. And for the most part, what they knew of the Catholic Church was stuff that they saw in headlines or in tabloids, or from mucks like me on a YouTube video. That's part of the reason why we're making this podcast now, is to dispel some of those rumors, some of those misconceptions about the Catholic faith, and to do so in a way that doesn't shy away from some of those harder questions. And so hopefully by listening to this, you can come to a little bit deeper understanding and decide for yourself whether or not Catholicism really is for you. But I do believe strongly that without that information, you can never really make a well-informed decision. And I'm all about knowing why you do something before you do it. We don't want to be blind followers. We want to be well-informed. We want to intelligently choose with a clear conscience what we do and who we serve in our life. So that age of Christendom, we're not all growing up in this town or society or country where each and every step you take, the faith is there and present. Now, there are certainly countries like this. I'm lucky enough to have some friends that grew up in the Philippines, and they jokingly say that when they were a kid, they thought that their birthday was a holy day of obligation. They had to go to Mass on their birthday, which is a little silly and funny now thinking back on it, but that sort of is the age of Christendom that we hope to live in. See, in prior episodes, we talked about how the culture you surround yourself with is one that informs your day-to-day action and your future choices. You can only make choices based on your prior experience. So all the things you consume, the world in which you live, it decides in large part what options you have for your future. And if I take that and I apply it to these Catholic parishes, my evaluation comes back as the people working in these parishes, whether they be in formation like myself or they're clergy, priests, deacons, religious, or they're volunteers trying to run a Bible study or a book club out of their local parish. The thing that they all have in common is they're talking to the people they're trying to serve as if they, the people they're serving, have the same life experience and environment that they themselves have. See, you don't get to a point of working for a parish or volunteering at your local church if you haven't already had a sizable change of your heart, your soul, your mind. You've decided to give your life, or at least a portion of it, over to the church. And that says a lot about who you are and what you're willing to surround yourself and your family with. That's an environment, a culture, if you will, of Christianity, of Christendom. But the fact is that most people that we're trying to evangelize, that we're trying to form in the faith, teach about Catholic morals and teachings, those people don't live in that environment. They live much more in the environment that I described I grew up in. You know, one in which it's largely away from the faith. And in many ways, broken, sinful, and so far from rooted in Christ and Scripture and His teachings that you'd be very understandably ignorant of a lot of those teachings, ignorant of the way in which one might live in faith. Not ignorant in the negative way, but just ignorant because you're not exposed to it. You know, something that was really shocking to me in my 20s is I got to college, I went to University of Wisconsin, and when I went there, I had, as I mentioned before, I'd continued to practice the faith. I went to Mass on my own oftentimes, and when I got to college, I had received my baptism, I had received my first Holy Communion, those two wonderful sacraments. But because I stopped my Catholic education at the ripe age of 8, I didn't know anything about confirmation. Maybe some of you are in a similar boat. Maybe this is the first time you're being told that the sacraments are for everyone and they are an outpouring of God's grace. The church isn't a gatekeeper of the sacraments, but rather a facilitator of them. The sacraments come from Christ, and it's not my job as a director of formation or a priest's job at your local church to deny you the sacraments. It's our job to help facilitate you receiving them, because it's all about giving and gifting those sacraments to one another, teaching each other about them, making them more available. But oftentimes we live in ignorance. We live in the unknown. I didn't know about confirmation, so I never asked for it. But by pure chance, I went to Mass one day at the Newman Center at University of Wisconsin, and I heard that there were classes for confirmation. What? Can I do confirmation? Is that for me? Or is that just like for like a different group of people that go to this Mass and I don't know about? Well, no, it's for all of us. And so I went through OCIA and I became fully initiated into Catholicism. But that's a small example of living in an environment that's so removed from the Christian story and values that it leads to a lack of understanding and ignorance, if you will, of how to operate within. So where does that leave us? We're not in that age of Christendom. We're not in an era of time where the prevailing culture the mindset of the world we live in is orientated towards Christ and his teachings, his church. Well, what do? Well, we go back to the saints. See, in Catholicism, we use the saints not as idols to set up on a shelf and worship. No, that's reserved for God. We look at the saints as our brothers and sisters, our friends. And what do you do with your friends? Have you ever found yourself praying to God on a particular struggle or topic, and then you go to your grandma or your best friend and you say, hey, I'm going through a tough time. Would you pray for me? Have you ever asked someone to pray for you? Even some people that are very unreligious have that habit. Because we know that it's okay to live in fellowship. It's love, it's relationship. And to ask somebody else who cares about you and you care about them to pray for you it's good, it's natural. So it's not idolatry with the saints. No, as Catholics, they're our best friends. And they're the holiest people we know. So just like that grandmother that prays her rosary every day and you think is really, really holy, you go and ask her to pray for you, the saints are no different. So maybe pick up a Lives of the Saints book, investigate a few of them, because I can promise you, you're going to find a lot of yourself in them, because they weren't all perfect. They weren't choir boys and nuns. Some of them lived lives just like you and me, filled with ups and downs, skinned knees, and harsh words. Go to the saints, learn about their lives, and maybe ask them to pray for you, so that just like them, you can reorientate your life back to God. Because ultimately, that's what the saints did. They might have lived their life, maybe sometimes in sin, but eventually, at some point, they decided to let go of those things and adhere their life, their mind, their actions towards God. That's what it means to be a saint, to be in heaven, to be with God. And that doesn't mean that you were perfect the whole time through. So we go to those saints, the earliest saints that we're looking at when we think of the apostolic age, the guide for us, for our future, are the apostles. That's what the apostolic age is all about. The apostles, Peter, James, John, Andrew, those 12 men, those apostles, what was their mission? They went into a world that didn't know Jesus Christ. He was just a guy by the Roman Empire standards. Sure, maybe he had like a following and he was starting to make a bit of a ruckus in the province of Judea, but other than that, the Roman Empire had seen hundreds of guys like this. Who was he? I don't know, the average Roman would say. But that's the thing, that's what Jesus asked them to do. Jesus told Peter and the rest of the apostles to go to that guy in the Roman Empire who'd never heard of Jesus and tell the story. Tell the story of Jesus Christ. To sort of shift their mindset a little bit. Because remember, you can't make a choice if you don't have all the tools in front of you. So you can't choose to live with God and in the Christian way without knowing who Jesus is to begin with. So that's what the apostles did. They went to a world who didn't know Christ and they taught the world who he was. And in the teaching of that, they presented the world a choice. Do you want to live the way you've been living, according to the rules and laws of the world? Or do you want a different way? Do you want this way of love, of charity, of peace, of forgiveness? Do you want to live a little bit different? And many did. Many chose to live differently. But that was a world and a sales pitch that was fairly easy. I guess I would say it was easy. Because what kind of faith practice was going on? Were they completely devoid of any faith or religion or ritual practice? No. The ancient Romans, the Greco-Roman world, are all around the Mediterranean where these apostles went. They all practiced a faith tradition. Sure, they were pagan. They were worshiping Egyptian gods or Greek and Roman gods like Zeus and Poseidon and Hera. But they still practiced. They still had sacrifices. They knew and lived their life according to a supernatural order. They lived their life day to day with a knowledge of a spiritual world, a spiritual truth. That's a powerful thing. And it makes selling Christ a little bit easier, doesn't it? Because you go into that world and you're not telling them to change their entire cosmic worldview, to believe that there is a spiritual reality. No, they already believe in the spiritual reality. All you're doing is saying, you're looking at the wrong spiritual being. Because the one true God is Him, this Jesus Christ. He is the Lord of the universe, not Zeus and Osiris and all the rest. But they didn't have to completely change the mindset of these people. They still believed in the supernatural. It was just misplaced. But what about our day, today? What are we supposed to do? See, the world started with these pagan traditions. They were practicing religions. And then the apostles came and they taught a different path, but still in that spiritual realm. But then slowly but surely, that built to be the prevailing culture. It was no longer, hey, who's this Jesus? I never heard of him. But by 1900, 1,900 years after the birth of Christ, essentially the whole world had heard who Jesus was, who he is, and the life he encourages us to live. But what's happened since 1900? Since, let's just say, World War I? Since that time, Catholic parishes all across the world, but most notably in the Western civilization, think Europe, North America, has been on the decline. We've seen less and less babies getting baptized. We've seen less and less Catholic marriages. We've seen less and less people going to Mass every Sunday. So it's not that they didn't know Jesus. No, they knew him. They decided to reject him. Now that's a very different challenge that we have. We have to go back to a world that knows who Jesus is. They've heard him. They heard about him. They know what he teaches, and they rejected it. And our new apostolic age, our new mission, if we choose it, is to help them fall back in love with him. You know, I'm a child of divorce. Maybe many of you have experienced divorce in some way, shape, or form. Think about those real practical examples of divorce in your life. Maybe once or twice you had a thought, oh, what if they could just go back, turn back the clock to where they were at the beginning? I know I did with my parents, especially when I was little. I wanted them to get back together. Eventually I gave up that hope. Where are we in that path? Are we giving up hope? You know, parish leaders, are you actively thinking about the people that you're trying to serve and really evaluating what they do and don't know about Catholic teaching, Catholic practice? Or are you talking to them and using words that they don't understand, like liturgy or evangelization? And is that really what's important to bringing them back to the faith? If I was going to use that divorce example, would it be important to go over, if I was going to bring and reconcile two individuals back together after the heartbreak of divorce and the messiness of it, would it be important to go over, you know, all the logistics of taxes and house payments and trust funds if they existed? Or would it be more important to talk about the relationship, the heart? Sure, those other things, the practical nature, the words like liturgy and evangelization, the different parts and elements of the Mass. Sure, those things are important, but they come after the heart. That's where we need to start. We need to go to where their heart is. And that might mean going in places, journeying to places that are dark and unknown and different. Not places that you're comfortable with. But if we really love those lost sheep, what did Jesus say in the parable? Did he say, well, I don't want to go out into the wilderness and get that one lost sheep because like I've got these others? No, he went out. He risked everything, went into the unknown where danger might be for that one. When's the last time you went out to where those lost sheep are? Those people in your life that know about Jesus, know about his message, and either rejected it or never really gave it a fair shot. When's the last time you went out to them? And not here, read this Bible, but just talk to them in love and shared how part of the reason why you get up every day and choose to love other people is not from you because you're some super special person, but it's because Jesus directed you to do so. His church gave you guidance on how to love. You might be asking yourself, well, okay, Nathan, that's all well and good, but how do I even do that without sounding like a total weirdo? You know, you don't just like walk up to somebody that is your cousin or your best friend and be like, hey, so like there's this Jesus guy and you should totally get to know him. Weird, right? You don't do that. You live in relationship with him. There's a phrase I like to use, is called relationship equity. So think about the people in your life. The different people in your life all have different levels of relationship equity, if you will. For example, I can ask my brother certain things that I can't ask my mom, or vice versa. There's parts of my life that I'll share with my wife, but it would be very weird for me to share with my best friend. There's different levels of relationship. And maybe you have different levels of friends, and that's a natural and normal thing. So live in that friendship, but be uncompromising in your faith. What do I mean by that? Every relationship you have, there is an opportunity to hide or deny your faith. There always is. The challenge, the hard part of living a Christian life is not compromising and not hiding it. Think back through your life right now, even the last few months or years. How many chances have you had to hang out with a friend on a given Sunday to maybe watch the football game? And you had the opportunity to go to Mass that morning, but maybe you didn't because it would have been weird, right? To be like, oh, I gotta go. It's not that weird to say, hey, I got this thing I gotta do. I'll be back. And every so often they ask because they're curious, because they love you and they want to know about your life. And that's your chance. That's your opportunity to be like, I'm going to Mass. You don't have to evangelize any more than that. You don't have to preach at them. I actually highly encourage you not to preach at them. It doesn't work. Because see, there's a negative catechesis. What do we mean by catechesis? We mean teaching the faith, right? There's a good teaching the faith that leads people closer to God, but there's not like a zero. You can't just like, oh, I either was good at teaching the faith and I brought someone closer to God, or it didn't work and no harm, no foul. No, that's a lie we tell ourselves. There is a negative. Because see, for every person who has taught the faith and shared the message of Christ with someone that brought a person to the faith, there's another person who told them that they can never be accepted by the parish and that they never enter heaven because they got divorced or had a child out of wedlock. That's bad catechesis. That's bad teaching. So there's never a net zero. You're either teaching well or you're teaching negatively. Our mission is to make it as easy as possible, right? Like we don't want to like parse out and really look too deeply at like, all right, am I doing this? Am I saying the right words? Am I teaching the faith in a good way? Keep it simple. Live in relationship with them exactly as you are. But when those opportunities come up, and they will come up, to say, I am going to Mass, or I'll be there in a little bit. Why am I late? I was praying my rosary. Or even just, I was praying. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. But those opportunities exist, and oftentimes we decide not to share that part of ourselves. Maybe sometimes it's because we're fearful. Maybe sometimes it's just because we don't want to be weird. It's not weird to give the reason why you're late or why you got to leave. And then, you know what happens? Beautiful thing happens. You share that enough times and you build up relationship equity to have those conversations you really, really want to have. Because you dedicated your life to this thing. You want them to ask you, why? Why do you do that? They will ask. But you got to let them ask. You can't push it onto them. So that's our mission. Or at least, in my opinion, it ought to be. To spread the love and message of Jesus Christ. So that we can move from this age, this apostolic age, where we're these new apostles going out into the world that once loved Jesus Christ and decided they don't like him much anymore. Our mission is to help them fall back in love with He who is love. God bless. If you found that clip helpful in any way for your spiritual life, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel so that others might be helped in the same way.